You know, in the world of big money business deals, there's a really fine line between just being a tough negotiator and making a flat-out illegal threat. But where exactly is that line? Okay, so let's dive into this legal maze and figure out when that intense business pressure actually crosses over into something the law calls economic duress.
I want you to picture this for a second. You are completely backed into a corner, and the only way out is to sign a contract you really do not want to sign. You feel like you have absolutely no other choice. So you sign it. Is that signature actually legally binding? Well, that is the million-dollar question we're going to unpack today using a fascinating real-world case.
So to get to the bottom of this, we're going to look at a classic textbook legal battle, Pow On versus Lao Yu Long. Trust me, it's a great story. It's got two powerful families, a huge corporate deal, and a last-minute demand that almost brought the whole thing crashing down.
All right, so let's meet our players. On one side, you have the Pow family. They want to sell their private company. Pretty simple. On the other side, you've got the Lao family who want to buy it, and their plan is to do a share swap with their own publicly traded company. On the surface, it's a fairly standard, although massive, corporate deal.
Okay, so here's how it was supposed to go. The two families signed the main agreement for the share swap. But, and this is the key detail, the POWs agree to something called a lock-in clause. And then it hits them, like a sudden uh-oh moment. This lock-in clause, it puts them in a super risky spot. I mean, what if the Lao's stock price completely tanks? The POWs would be trapped, holding on to shares that could become worthless. They realize they need a safety net, and they need one fast.
And this is exactly where the friendly negotiation just takes a nosedive. The Laos see their chance, they turn the tables, and it leads to a second, really controversial agreement that was signed under some pretty extreme pressure.
Now check out the difference here. The main agreement, that was a balanced, carefully planned share swap. But this new demand from the Laos, it was a guarantee. The Laos basically said, we will only go through with this if you, the Pasos, personally promise to cover our losses if our stock price drops. The threat was simple, but it was brutal. Sign this new guarantee, or the entire deal is off.
The message couldn't have been clearer. No guarantee, no deal. I mean, talk about being over a barrel. The Pow family was stuck. If they refused, this massive, complex deal that they had spent months working on would just, poof, evaporate. But if they signed, they'd be taking on a gigantic personal financial risk. What do?
So in the end, the POWs signed. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. Later on, when the Laos tried to cash in on that guarantee, the POWs cried foul. They said, no way, we were illegally forced into that. And this whole mess forced the court to step in and create a really clear legal test for what actually counts as economic duress.
So what does that term even mean? Well, economic duress isn't just tough bargaining. It's what the law calls illegitimate pressure. And it's got to be so intense that it basically robs you of your free will. The legal term for this is vitiating consent, which is a fancy way of saying it just cancels out your agreement because you weren't really free to choose. The key words here are illegitimate and your consent being totally wiped out.
Now, to figure out if that super high standard was met, the court developed this brilliant four-part test. It's like a checklist. First, did the person protest when the pressure was being applied? Second, did they have any other realistic option, like suing? Third, did they get advice from their own lawyers before they signed? And fourth, after they signed, did they try to get out of the deal right away? Each one of these questions really gets to the heart of whether someone's will was truly broken. Okay, so armed with this powerful new legal framework, the court started to pick apart the facts of the case. So let's get to the final verdict and see how the Pow family story held up against this test. And I gotta say, the result might actually surprise you. The court's finding was crystal clear. There was no economic duress. That's right. The guarantee, the one signed under all that crazy pressure, was found to be legally valid and totally enforceable.
So, you're probably thinking, how is that possible? Why? Well, the court saw this as commercial pressure. Very tough pressure for sure, but not an illegal threat. The Palace weren't seen as some helpless victims. The court pointed out, look, these are sophisticated business people. They knew the risks. Plus, they had other options. They could have walked away and just sued the Laos for breaking the first contract. And here's the kicker. They had their lawyers with them the entire time, and they didn't protest. The court's conclusion? Their will wasn't broken. They just made a calculated business decision.
And there's one more little legal twist here, around this idea of consideration. Basically, for a contract to be legit, both sides have to get something valuable. And the court said that the Lactus' promise to simply finish the original deal was enough consideration for that new guarantee. Why? Because the Palos got a real, practical benefit, they got to avoid a huge, messy lawsuit, and they got their deal done. It showed the new contract wasn't just a one-sided demand, it was more of a two-way street.
So this whole case leaves us with a really important question for today, right? In our super fast-paced world with tight deadlines and massive financial pressure, that line between hardball tactics and illegal coercion is more relevant than ever. And knowing where that line is and how a court might draw it, well, that's absolutely crucial for anyone in business.